I'd like to welcome you all to an evening of Q&A with Elsom Eldridge, the consultant's consultant. I thank you for being here, Elsom. I really appreciate it. Sorry for the
My pleasure, Mark.
I know you're very busy, and you just flew in, just touched down in time to make it to the
Here we are. Exactly.
That's great. We've had a little discussion before you got in here about how you hooked up with the NGH, and there were also some questions that people had asked about some hypnotic work, and I wasn't sure whether you were a hypnotist or trained as a hypnotist or did hypnotic work with people as a consultant, doing consulting hypnosis. So why don't you give us a little background about how you got involved with hypnosis and the hypnotic the NGH?
Well, how I got involved with hypnosis actually goes back to an interest that grew out of my teen years, and I knew Dwight Damon. We were both teenage magicians, let's say, growing up in Nashua, New Hampshire, and my father was an Episcopal clergyman, and Dwight's father had a business actually right next door to my father's church. So we knew each other, let's say, a year or 50 ago. And so I, along the way, was watching Dwight Damon, now Dr. Dwight Damon, as he became more interested in hypnosis. I sort of acquired a similar interest, a curiosity first, and then growing interest. And while I was away at private school, a couple of years after that, I managed to not make a lot of my masters and or the headmaster thrilled with my finding peers to practice my, let's say, trying out skills on. Again, curiosity at the time. And it was later on that I became more aware of the tremendous value that hypnosis has and the power of the mind has. And so while I don't practice as a hypnotist, I consider myself a fairly astute marketer, and that's sort of where my platform spends its time. But as a result of my interest in hypnotism, I've enjoyed tremendously helping hypnotists get their practices out into the forefront of whatever community they're in. And so that's sort of where I guess I would say my specialty is not in practicing hypnotism, but in helping others grow their practice. And that's I began helping consultants build their practices and their coaching practices, and then that sort of just moved right over to helping hypnotists. And my time with the guild has been, I guess, about 25 years now.
Wow. You authored a book a few years ago called How to Position Yourself as the Obvious Expert, a kind of a how-to guide on how to be that expert, that people seek you out rather than you having to, find them. So it becomes what they term instead of being a push strategy for marketing, it's a pull strategy for marketing. People are coming to you. And how did you get involved in teaching people how to become obvious experts? And how would you go about doing that for a hypnotist starting out or looking to drum up business in this kind of an environment?
Let me reframe that. I don't teach people how to become the obvious expert. I teach people who are experts how to position themselves as the obvious expert. So let's talk about what that means.
All right.
Because anyone that Anyone that would try and do this without being an expert in whatever area they're in, and it could be any of those we just talked about, it could be anything, whether pick an area in hypnotism or anything. Originally, this program was developed for consultants and coaches, and teaching consultants and coaches, and it's the same thing, whether it's hypnotists or lawyers or chiropractors for that matter. I sort of focus on hypnotists these days because that's an area I'm so vividly involved with. But the difference between being an expert, which one acquires on their own, through training, through practice, through elevating one's own mind in whatever specialty it is, and the more expert you become, the better you are with it, the more people you work with it, again, the more expert you become. But you're the one that knows that, and you're maybe the only one that knows how expert you have become, are becoming, and are growing. The idea of what I call the obvious expert is when other people know you are the expert.
Right.
Other people know that you in your community have helped a lot of people stop smoking. I'll use that for the moment. Or lose weight or whatever. And so when other people are talking about you, then in referring people to you, then now you're what I refer to as the obvious expert. As long as you're the only one that knows it, and you're the only one that's saying it, by the way, if you are the only one that says, I am the expert, well, that doesn't make you the obvious expert as I identify it. So then the question is, all right, and now we go to what I teach in that particular book, which is how to position yourself as the obvious expert once you've become the expert. How to build your business, how to have more people talking about you. And that's really what it's about. How do you get more people talking about you as the expert in the local area of somebody that everyone they know should go see about how to stop smoking. They should do it today. And the higher you are on the ladder of what we'll call obvious expertise, the higher you're recognized that way, the higher your stature goes as being the authority in whatever specific specialty you want to become. Then that will automatically drive business your way. So let's go to what that means. So I'm going to invite those who are on the call to take a couple notes. And let's just start with the word. Well, let's start with the letter B, okay? And I'm going to suggest you make a list starting at the top of the paper, and we're going to do B is at the top, okay? And that letter B and stands for books. Stands for book. One of the ways to position yourself as an obvious expert, as the obvious expert, as the go-to authority, is to have authored a book. Doesn't have to be a great book, but it should be a relevant book to the topic at hand, so that it can be a thin book that can be handed out as a brochure even. It can be a major volume. It's fairly easy. I'll take that back. It's very easy to, number one, get a book created, create a book, and to get a book printed. With print on demand these days, and when I'm talking about print on demand, I'm referring to the fact that you can write a 200, 300-page book, and a printer such as lightningsource.com, they'll print 1 book, 5 books, 10 books, 100 books, 1,000 books, one by one, if need, in order to be able to get into it very inexpensively. Lightning Lightning Press, in their case, they're owned by one of the largest distributors, and so one of the advantages with them is that they any books that they print for those of us that use it, they automatically go into the catalog of the largest distributor, and they can be available for bookstores. So B stands for books. Next letter is R, the letter R. R stands for, and we're coming down from the top to the bottom as we think about this. R stands for reports. And some people have said, well, I haven't got time to write a book. So, and in our world, we're talking about nonfiction books, right, Mark? And
yes.
We're talking about a book that's going to give advice to somebody about how to solve a problem of some kind. And that's in the nonfiction area, and we like to make the book evergreen, and what that means, it's going to be good for years to come. Now, when you write a book, and you're known as the author of a book, we'll go back to that for just a minute, you become known as, or positioned as, if not known as, the obvious expert. Just think about it. Anyone who has authored a book, it just sort of puts you on that, almost at the top of that ladder, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So when somebody comes and says, I haven't got time to write a book, I understand that. I didn't have time to write the 3 or 4, the 4 or 5 now that I've done. However, one can begin with the second letter, which is reports. And if you write a 16 to 32 page report, going back to the book, you might have 13 chapters in a book, let's say. And each one of those chapters could be a different element of the problem that is being solved in the book. If we're talking about diets, then you're going to have different things about nutrition, about exercise, about mind management. You're going to come up with like 13 different chapters, 13 different topics to be in that book. All 13 chapters would be the total book if one had those. However, if you were to make a list of someday thinking about writing a book and list a dozen topics that you might put into your book about the expert problem you want to help people solve, and then break that up into 12 different specific learnings, smaller problems within the big problem, then if you were to write a report, 12, 16, 32-page report about nutrition, let's say, as it applies to losing weight very quickly, then, okay, that's a report, losing weight very quickly, thinking of nutrition. Maybe the word think is in it because we're talking about the mind. By Mark. And so Marc Carlin has written this book on nutrition. Now, a report is almost as good as a book in terms of obvious expert positioning. And you make that report available, and if you were to contemplate the idea, let's do one new report a month. Would you agree that, Mark, that probably almost everyone could, if they just said, okay, I'm going to do a 16-page report every month, and just thinking of we made up the 12 topics, and so we're going to do one a month. Would you agree that that's probably a possible thing for just about anybody to do if they really wanted to get the word out about their being the expert in the world?
Absolutely. The only thing that's preventing them from doing it is actually doing it.
That's right.
Getting started. That's the biggest hurdle.
To hear the complete interview, including all 12 steps that will position you as the obvious expert, go to virtualgastricbandtraining.com.